Hey everyone, welcome back to Midnight Tales. Forests have always intrigued me and brought me a sense of peace. However, forests are also known to be dangerous and often frightening places. These stories you are about to hear come from people who have had strange, terrifying, or even dangerous situations in forests. So sit back, relax, and while you're at it, hit that subscribe button. Enjoy horrors straight from the depths of the forest. Story number 1. One of my best buds from college was a geologist major who ended up becoming a park ranger in the southeastern United States. We hadn't spoken in years, as is the case with age, but I remember about 8 or 9 years ago he was telling me about an old married couple that he had recently helped out. He had seen them come to the park several days in a row and found out they were visiting from out west, and they had gotten engaged in the park decades prior. They had been searching for a spot they'd taken pics in when he had popped the question, but they were having trouble. After looking at the pics and figuring out roughly where they were trying to get to, he escorted them in his vehicle, then hiked them to where he thought it would be. They found it, and he left them there and went back to his station at the entrance. He said he got a weird feeling once he got back and felt he needed to wait to see them whenever they left. Well, once it came time to lock up for the night, he still hadn't seen them leave, so he reported it, left his assistant to wait at the shack at the entrance, and went back to where he had left them. He found both of them lying down, spooning along the bank of the river. Neither was alive. He called the cops, went through the whole 9 yards, and then went home. The police were able to disclose to him their identities, but weren't sure of anything concrete initially. Later he learned that the wife was terminally ill with cancer, and they had both committed suicide by ingesting some sort of chemical pill combination medley. They had chosen to do it where they had gotten engaged. My buddy wasn't torn up about it though. He was sad about their deaths but said that he thought they hadn't asked for help earlier because they didn't want anyone to think that he had helped to kill them. Story number 2. In 2016, my boyfriend, now my husband, and I went camping in eastern Pennsylvania. The place we decided to stop for the night was primitive. Camping was free, no cell service, barely a road, etc. We did encounter 2 other people. They might not factor into what happened later at all, but they were creepy, so I'll describe them. The first was a woman who had her truck off to the side of the road a little as we drove past. She had the hood open and seemed to be waiting for someone to stop and offer to help. Usually my boyfriend had no problem helping someone, but he said his time something about her put him off. She didn't really seem like she needed help, and usually people who need help look at you hopefully as you approach. She looked like she just expected we would stop. That's what my boyfriend said anyway. I hadn't noticed anything that strange about her. The next person came when we had chosen a spot and were setting up a fire for hot dogs. I had noticed people drive by a few times, but my boyfriend pointed out each time was the same car, and the man in the car watched us each time he passed. My boyfriend was a little uneasy about this, but we had driven around for a while before finding a place we liked. It had been raining, and everything was muddy, and we wanted the driest site possible. He could have been doing the same thing. We briefly thought about moving, but the road was muddy too. If he wanted to find us, all he had to do was follow the tracks. There were some other tracks, but not many. He'd only have to backtrack a little to locate us again. He didn't come by another time, so we stayed and spent the several remaining hours before dark goofing off. No one else drove by. Whether or not those 2 had anything to do with our experience, real fear did come later. We had gone to sleep in our tent, and sometime around 3 in the morning we were awoken by this very loud noise. I can't describe it very well or even remember exactly what it sounded like, but my boyfriend said it reminded him of a chainsaw revving up. It was also similar to how it would sound if someone recorded a shovel being dragged over gravel and played it over a loudspeaker. That's another good way to describe this horrific sound. My boyfriend jumped up and looked out the little window but couldn't see anything. The sound repeated itself another few times. I was too scared to speak, so my boyfriend whispered that it was probably miles off and I should go back to sleep. I didn't question this and figured loud sounds could be easily heard miles off. After we left, he told me it sounded like it had been coming from just down the road, but he didn't want me to freak out, so didn't mention it. Looking back, I probably should have wondered why he would bother to whisper if the sound was far off. I was still terrified. Every little thing I heard outside sounded like someone was walking around the tent. We lay there for a while longer, when finally my boyfriend told me to get dressed because we were leaving. I got alarmed by this, and even more alarmed when he unwrapped the machete we had bought just for this trip. Before opening the tent, we quickly packed up and loaded the car. I looked around for footprints that weren't our own, but despite the moonlight providing plenty of light, I couldn't see. I did point out something my boyfriend hadn't noticed before we got into the car. There was a beer can by our dead fire that hadn't been there before. We didn't even bring beer. While we drove away, my boyfriend explained that he was nervous someone might have been trying to lure us out, so he didn't think it was a good idea to run from the tent right away. He also half expected to find our gas tank siphoned, but that wouldn't have stopped us because he had a hybrid car. We joked that it would have been funny and would have made a great hybrid TV ad. The number of brutal murders avoided by driving a hybrid. 2. We only joked because we were shitting ourselves from fear and the adrenaline that had been coursing through us. The rest of the trip, we only stayed in well-populated campsites or we opted for a hotel. What do you think happened here? And would we have survived if we hadn't packed up and left? Story number 3. To be clear, I am not a forestry, I just have a related story. My cousin works for the Forest Service in the Montana/Wyoming area, and I decided to go up there with her to literally test the waters. She does hydrology and has to ride out to the middle of nowhere to test streams and snow runoff to ensure there are no contaminants. So I thought joining her would be fun, and I also wanted to do a bit of a tour with her. We would have to camp for 2 nights, so we packed all our gear in the saddlebags, or saddle bundles as some call them, and started our adventure. The first day and night were amazing, beautiful scenery and amazing air quality. It is so peaceful out there. I love that area and wish to go up there more often. Anyway, we started on the second day and my cousin said, "You want to see something weird?" Of course I said yes, and so she led me on a bit of a side quest into this tiny little ravine. We ended up traveling around 2 hours from the actual path we had laid out, and at the very end of this fold in the land, she dismounts and tells me to get off my horse too. We tied them up in this gorgeous little clearing, and then I followed her into this tiny wildlife path, having brought the little rechargeable radio she asked me to earlier. The radio is one of those you can plug in or wind up, and it also acts as a lantern if you need it to. But that function kills the batteries quickly. I took some things with me, and a short time later we came up on this huge coil of wire sticking out of the ground in the middle of fucking nowhere. The wire was not weirdly large, like some buried transmission wire, but small, like 10 or 12 gauge wiring for a house. It trailed off into the brush and trees, so naturally, I decided to follow the damn thing out of sheer curiosity. My cousin trailed behind me as I walked, and this wire, after coming straight up from the ground, is strung across limbs of trees, then back to the ground. It then snaked around rocks and finally dead-ended into an outlet. That outlet was mounted on the side of a desk. It looked like a school teacher's desk from where I grew up, with a metal base and a pseudo wood/plastic top thing. No chair, no building, no nothing, just this outlet and the lone desk hidden in the trees. So there I stand, staring at this desk, confused as hell by its place in the middle of the forest. My cousin then took the radio from me, pulled out the cord and plugged it into the outlet. That fucker lit up and started blaring static. The wire was being fed somewhere. For reference, the place we stood had no road access, no buildings for many miles, and no other people around. And yet, there was this live outlet. Weird as shit. No spooky jump scares or bodies, just one lone desk powered by a cord in the middle of the woods. I wish I'd taken a picture of it. Still think about it to this day. So off-putting, seeing it sitting there almost waiting for someone to find it. Story number 4. Not a ranger, but this happened while I was hiking in Andorra with a friend. Long story short, we got lost and couldn't find the trail, causing us to end up in Spain. We eventually found another trail, but we're following it without a map. A good distance ahead of us on this trail, we see a man with 2 golden retrievers walking in the same direction we are. He looks young and is carrying climbing gear over his shoulder. We're rushing down the trail to catch up with him, and eventually, we do. We ask him for help with directions, and he manages to tell us exactly where we are and where we need to be. About 12 kilometers away, there's a town with a hotel. He says there's another, smaller town about 6 kilometers away, and that he parked his car there. He says he can give us a lift for the last 6 kilometers if we like, but says that he is in a hurry, and we need to keep up with him. We are over the moon after hearing the information, and so we hike together for a while. The dogs are nice and friendly, running circles around us. We are chatting away with the surprisingly nice guy, but as fatigue catches up to my friend and me, we struggle to keep pace with him. The trail soon bent to the right, and the man, now a little ahead of us, disappeared behind the bend. We make it to the spot a few minutes later, and the trail ahead is empty. No man and no dogs, even though the trail is a straight run for quite a while and we should have been able to see them. The 2 of us continue, alarmed, waiting to hear/see something or perhaps be murdered by a stranger. However, nothing happens. We got to the town eventually, and from there made it to the safety of the hotel in the next town over. We were completely freaked out by his sudden disappearance, and to this day we are both convinced he was a ghost, sent to help us through what could have been a dangerous and frightening experience. Hey everyone, if you made it this far, thank you for stopping by and watching the video. I hope you enjoyed, and if you like my content, consider hitting that subscribe button. My goal is to hit 1,000 subscribers by the end of the year. With your help, we can make that happen. Again, thank you for the support. Keep on enjoying these spooky stories from yours truly, Mr. Midnight Tales.